See, this is me, Boba Fett.
Welcome to the Star Wars Exchange's Book of Boba Fett review show, hosted by Ari and Mike. Join us as we lay honor and respect upon the land of Mos Espa.
I intend to rule with respect.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the podcast for another episode reviewing the Book of Boba Fett, episode 3. It's great to be back. Mike, how are we?
I'm doing fantastic. It's another episode of Book of Boba Fett, and I'm just here to talk about it once again.
Absolutely, and this week we have a very, very special guest. You might know his YouTube videos, one of the greatest breakdowners of Star Wars I know. He's so good at it. His name's Pykes, ArTorr on YouTube. How you going, man?
I'm doing wonderful. I gotta say, it's an honor to have been invited on here. I'm glad you guys appreciate the videos, to say the least. I'm excited to talk about Star Wars today.
Absolutely. And before we crack into Boba Fett talk, Pykes, tell us just a bit about yourself for those that don't know, your YouTube channel, or just your Star Wars history. Just let us know. Throw us in the deep end.
Certainly. So, as you said, my YouTube channel is ArTorr. I do a number of deep dive, analysis, discussion, video essay, documentary-esque videos, however you might refer to it, on video games, movies, shows. I do a lot of discussion on Star Wars content because I have been, I wouldn't say a lifelong Star Wars fan, but probably since I was 7 years old, and I remember watching the the Spike TV marathon for, when we had cable for the Star Wars movies. I think the first one that I watched, I tuned in, the first Star Wars scene I had ever seen, tuned in right at the beginning of the Gungan battle with the battle droids and the Phantom Menace. And, as a kid, I didn't really, understand anything that was happening, but I was like, this is so cool. And I remember seeing Darth Maul pop up and just being, shocked and being like, who the heck is this guy? My dad was like, I asked my dad, who is that? Because he had seen all the Star Wars movies, and he said, oh, that's Darth Vader. I'll never forget that, just because it was so funny watching all the films, waiting for that connection to happen, and then being like, what was my dad talking about? But anyway, I've enjoyed Star Wars for a very long time, and I've done YouTube videos for about as long. But really, the appeal with ArTorr was being able to, after all these years, finally be able to encapsulate my thoughts about, these various things that I enjoy between video games, movie shows, whatever. And, though I do want to talk about the Star Wars movies at some point, I couldn't have done that without first talking about the Clone Wars. And if you know me from anything, you probably know me from those videos. So, since then, it's really been a joy talking about all these different Star Wars projects and connecting with fans and different viewers who, have been looking for sort of the deeper meaning in these new Star Wars projects beyond, the references and the lore, which is great, but what I think really makes the stories meaningful and what, why we get so passionate about it is because it connects with parts of who we are. And that's something I so heavily want to convey in all the videos I do. So, I think that gives you the rundown on what I've done.
Yep. Oh, man, absolutely. It's like watching an ArTorr video live. I just love it. If you want more of that, make sure you head on over to the channel. And it is important to say there's more than just Star Wars videos on there. He does breakdowns of, as he says, all sorts of video games, movies, whatnot. So really couldn't encourage you enough to go check it out. So make sure you do. But yeah, I'm going to just throw out a spoiler warning from here because we're going to get into the Boba Fett talk. Haven't watched the latest episode, go watch it and come back. This is the warning. But yeah, so Pykes, also just tell us, how have you found Book of Boba Fett so far? We're 3 episodes in. How are you enjoying it?
I've been, I was listening to your last 2 episodes on Book of Boba Fett, and from what I could gather, you guys have never been a particular fan of Boba Fett, but with this show, he's potentially become one of your favorite, or is on his way to becoming one of your favorite Star Wars characters. For me, I'm of the crowd of Star Wars fans that, for whatever reason, has just adored Boba Fett since I first saw him. I could show you guys after we're done. You won't obviously see it on the podcast because it's recorded audio. But I have like this cool Boba Fett watch, and then in the corner of my room, I actually have a signed autograph from Jeremy Bullock, who I met at Star Wars Celebration when I was 10 years old or so. I'm a Boba Fett obsessed fan, and going into the show, of course, I was very excited. I thought he was done really well in The Mandalorian. There were some things about his character that I thought were curious sort of deviations from what I had previously thought of Boba Fett being like this cold-hearted, sort of ruthless, backstabbing bounty hunter, the best of the best. You know, the type of guy Vader walks up to in Empire Strikes Back and says, "No disintegrations," explicitly. And so far in Book of Boba Fett, I feel like none of that part of his character from his past has been erased, but rather what we're seeing with Boba Fett now is sort of like, I would almost liken it to, in a way, Darth Maul, where you had this character who was very interesting, appeared on screen, made a crucial mistake fighting the hero or whatever, died. Or so we thought they died, and then they came back. The big difference between Boba Fett and Maul being, Maul was someone who took the second chance that he got to, you know, do everything that he was trained to do. Sow chaos throughout the galaxy, rule over others, take power for his own. Boba Fett, on the other hand, because of what we've seen in his flashbacks in the show and what he's trying to do in the present day on the series, is he's someone who's sort of seeking a redemption. And to me, that feels so quintessentially Star Wars, the idea of redemption and him trying to leave a new legacy for himself as the daimyo of Mos Espa. And for that, I really enjoy it. It's given me a lot of things that I did not know I wanted from Boba Fett. All of the stuff with the Tuskens last week being a big example of that. Never would have sort of thought to, if I was writing the show, someone asked me to work on this show, I would have never thought to involve that element. It would have been, as many people had suspected previously, that Boba Fett killed like a Tusken Raider or something and took their gaffy stick, and that's how we see him in The Mandalorian, but really it's a lot more than that. And even then, some of the stuff in the modern day, though, that's more of what I was hoping to see from Boba Fett. It continues to surprise me, and that was definitely the case this week as well. So, on the whole, I'm very much enjoying the show.
I could listen to you speak all day about that. I was just invested. I felt like I was hearing Dave Filoni break it down. That was superb. And to what you're saying, like, yeah, I just never really found. I mean, listen, background drop Boba Fett, like, cool guy. Like, he's just a cool guy standing in the ground looking cool, you know? So I never really thought about him too deeply until, you know, Clone Wars came out with that awesome arc for Boba Fett in season 2, and I think I was in 5th grade when that came out. Didn't think about it too deeply, but it just put Boba Fett on my radar because I had, you know, seen Attack of the Clones. I thought that, you know, that was cool how they were, you know, exploring a little bit of his character, but seeing, you know, the aftermath of, you know, losing his father and going on a quest of revenge, and then being told, like, by Hondo, being like, oh, listen, remember what your dad wanted or would want you to be. He would want you to be honorable. So with this series, I feel like we're just coming full circle to that. But as what you're saying, he's also on a redemption arc, and as you said, it's what Star Wars is at the end of the day. So heck yeah, I loved every point you covered there. Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting. We're all kind of on slightly different spectrums. Like, Parks is on a very, like, you know, beforehand, I love Boba Fett. You were that kind of Boba Fett crazy fan type guy. I'm sort of like, I feel like I'm very in the middle. Like, I love Boba Fett, always have, but I've never been like, this guy is just the best. Like, what he makes Star Wars what it is. But like, I've always just thought he's real cool. And then Mike's probably on the other end being like, yeah, Boba Fett's alright, but, you know, all he's done is walked up to Darth Vader or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So like, we've got 3 very different perspectives here, which is interesting to hear. But let's talk about this latest episode called The Streets of Mos Espa, directed by Robert Rodriguez once again. But yeah, just tell us your overall thoughts on episode 3, Parks.
I liked it. I've, you know, obviously this episode, I was, you know, preparing to come on here and give my thoughts about it, and I was trying to sort of gather what people had thought about the episode on Twitter and such. And there's definitely some things in the episode that I think, as a Star Wars fan, you're initially going to go, okay, hang on. And there's also some things that I think might have been handled a little bit better. But being so tuned in as I am to sort of the way Filoni, Favreau, and now Rodriguez tell these Star Wars stories, whatever problems I have with the episode or whatever things I wasn't like totally sold on, I want to see the whole show like complete itself before I sort of go and definitively say like, oh, I don't like that or whatever the case is. So on the whole, I think it gave the plot for the show some needed momentum to let us know where we're going and prepare us for what's to come. And I think that was the best thing it did.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And I'm kind of on the same. I was like, yeah, it was a pretty good episode. I would describe the episode as a mixed bag. Like, I really, some things I was like, wow, like, that's awesome. What a cool setup. Even the flashbacks, I was like, yeah, they were great this episode. But then there's other things that I'm just like, okay, I'm not so sure, but completely agree with what you said. You just need to wait before you're going to go after these sort of things until a full series is done. And then you can sort of get, a proper idea of what that thing might actually become. And even then, you might not be giving it enough time. You look at a character like Ahsoka Tano, look at how she, because I think I know what we're all going to talk about later on in this episode. A character like Ahsoka first comes out, everyone hates her. What is it now? About a decade later, she's probably one of the most beloved characters in the franchise. Not saying that this biker gang is going to be like that, but little things in this episode that might not be getting appreciation right now. Just like have some patience and bear with it and see where it goes. But yeah, Mike, what did you think of the episode?
Listen, I don't know how we're being so calm right now. Danny Trejo is canon now. I just want to put that out there.
Oh my god, I love that. It's like the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing meme. Just
yes, exactly. Oh god, listen, when that scene first popped up, I freaking lost everything. I was like going crazy. Like if Ahsoka, if I was seeing maybe Luke Skywalker for the first time again in Mandalorian. That's the same reaction I had, just because I felt so seen, and it felt like I was back in my childhood. Not only because this episode was so Robert Rodriguez style, but it was just like that sprinkle on top of having Danny Trejo in there. It was just chef's kiss. But I think this episode, Parks, you bring up a great point about finally we get to an episode where it's like you're gonna stop and breathe for a second, and it's like spin us back around and be like, we're going this way now. It's like, okay, cool. I did appreciate that. I think this episode was very self-aware of, the flashback scene. I think the Tusken Raiders last episode, amazing. I think that episode in general was just like one of the best Star Wars things ever. I really, really love that episode, as you heard last week. But listen, when we were getting to that flashback point, I was like, oh, I really loved last week, but I felt like that was a nice cap on the flashback stuff, just because I wanted to get back into the present day. And they knew exactly where they were going and how we would be feeling, because I think I got a general, just from hearing what people were saying, everyone loved the Tusken Raider stuff last week. But when we were getting to that point this week, they're like, oh, are we going to go on another adventure? Everyone was kind of like, I want to kind of be in the present. So, yeah, I love how self-aware this episode was. I love that we kind of know where we're going now. And now there's, like, hooks at the end of the episode to keep us invested for future installments. And the only negative thing I have to say right now is we got to wait another week for another episode of Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, I think what's kind of interesting to me is, Mike, you would know, we've got a segment on the show where you talk about what's next for the show. And I think both episode 1 and 2, we've kind of got to that point in the show and being like, what is next? Like, I don't, like, we just didn't know. But now it's like, okay, I can see the direction we're headed. Like, it's still not completely clear. It's still a bit foggy, but it's like, okay, I can see where we're going. Not that, viewers need to know where it's going, but now it's like, okay, at least we have some sort of sense of direction while we're watching. But I think, let's jump in just to the episode. Let's break it all down. Talk about some of the big talking points from the episode, but let's go from the start. I think we had a very interesting sequence at the start. 8D8 is sort of outlining what territory is owned by who around Mos Espa. He's talking about how under Bib Fortuna, it was divided into 3 families. And even an interesting quote I found, Master Bib did not have the power of Jabba, so he relied on uneasy alliances to preserve his tribute and title. So we kind of got some needed backstory into how Mos Espa has sort of looked for the last 5 years, because we have sort of been thinking, okay, what has Bib Fortuna been up to? Because he's been in power for 5 years. Apparently he was lining the pockets of the mayor. Honestly, don't really know what that means. Maybe one of you two can tell me. But yeah, what do you guys think of this little history lesson we got at the start of the episode? We'll start with you, Parks.
Like you said, sort of much needed backstory and a bit of world building for Mos Espa to understand sort of the different regions that were under control by the different sort of families. I think it's not something that really gets brought back up again like any other time in the episode, but it does make me think of again, like we're saying with this episode, where the show is going, that not only do you have this threat that rises up at the end of the episode, but Boba Fett will also have to contend, I think, with these families that already control portions of Mos Espa. And possibly where this is going is him sort of preparing to deal with the Pykes by rallying sort of the allyship of these different families and being like, you know, we can keep Mos Espa away from the Syndicate if we sort of team up. That's what my read of that was, and seeing all of those, like them explaining like the control of the different parts of Espa.
I felt like I was later on in the episode when Fennec is mowing down on that chicken leg or whatever, tip yip or whatever you want to call it. I felt like that was me during the beginning of the episode, because that's exactly getting into the politics of who controls what and you know how people are viewing Boba Fett. That's exactly how what I wanted from this episode, or from the series I should say. So I was eating all of that up, all that little talk about regions and control, and finally Boba Fett waking up and being like, I got a space to run. I got to see how people view me. I got to be this leader. I got to fill in shoes. You know, who would have thought that Bib Fortuna would have... I thought he would have been the one that would have caved in and just lost, you know, had Mos Espa be like a total like free ground for everyone. But apparently he's been having a watchful eye. So yeah, I appreciated that whole opening scene. You know, getting our feet on the ground and telling us where we are with all this gang stuff. And yeah, some stuff is brewing. So I'm very, very, very intrigued as to what's to come.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, as you guys saying, just much needed history. Glad to see how things have been shaping up over the last few years. So yeah, and it'll provide some good context for episodes to come, I'm sure. But after this, we get very interesting interaction with a citizen called Lortha Peel. I looked in the credits, and I think he's played by someone of note. Honestly, I couldn't tell you, but I heard people talking about it. Anyway, he's concerned there's some biker gang people stealing his water, so we're all a bit confused what's going on here. And then we're introduced to, I'm just going to call them the biker gang. I wanted to call them the teenagers, but Mike made me say biker gang, so so the biker gang is I'm not really sure what I think of these guys. This is kind of what I was alluding to in my overall thoughts, but let's talk about them for a second, because this is just the exact thing. I'm just going to vaguely repeat what I said at the start. I think, okay, they're not really getting that well received right now. I think it's pretty clear to see on the internet that they're not getting a lot of appreciation. But and I must say myself, I was very like, oh, okay, I'm not sure about this. I'm not quite digging the vibe. I know a lot of people's criticism with this group is that, oh, that they don't fit in Star Wars or whatever. I disagree with that. That's not really my issue. I just don't think their sort of aura is matches the show that well is all. And I you know, as I said, there's still 4 episodes to go. That was kind of my first impression of them. I was like, okay, I'm not sure about these guys protecting Boba. Probably my biggest gripe was not even with the group, it was with Boba. So I liked the whole thing of, okay, you know, you guys are having to steal water, like you're that desperate. I'll give you a job, I'll give you shelter. I liked that. But then the job he gives them is to protect him, and I'm just curious, why has Boba all of a sudden thought, okay, this group of teenagers is going to protect my life? And they turned out being pretty good fighters and whatnot, so probably a good call from him. But I was just like, this is such a strange judgment call from Boba. But I don't know. I'm really interested to hear what you guys thought of this biker group. Parks, what do you think?
First off, that the actor you mentioned, I think his name's Stephen Root. I recognized him from Office Space, which is a fantastic movie.
There you go.
But yeah, it was a surprise seeing him, and there was a great line in there as well that underlines sort of this whole conflict that Boba Fett is facing of, you know, the people don't respect you or nobody respects you.
Exactly.
And you know, that's his whole thing. Like, I want to rule with respect. And this is a place, like Mos Espa is a place that, you know, the people here have long lived in fear of the daimyo and the ruler they have. So to go away from that, it's a big shift for a lot of people, and just putting a new leader in place doesn't make that go away. So I did like that. The biker gang, yeah, they're interesting. It reminded me immediately of something Filoni said once in reference to something George Lucas told him, which was like very infamously, well, not infamously, but just that any story can be a Star Wars story. And specifically, if you take American graffiti and put it in Star Wars, they'd be in speeders instead of cars. And so I immediately thought of that. This felt like a very, the biker gang felt like a very, it was definitely a very Rodriguez edition. And it felt like him paying homage to George Lucas insofar as like the American graffiti aspect. You know, you can't have Star Wars without this aspect of it, Lucas being a big gearhead, and that sort of being conveyed through the speeders here. Specifically, there's like a fun thing with it being sort of, it reminded me a little bit as well of sort of like the 60s mod like subculture in London, where you have like these bikers who were big on like fashion and like modding out their bikes to the craziest degree. And they're usually very colorful and very flamboyant. And so this definitely felt like a tip of the hat to that. And you know, Star Wars is very much like this cultural playground where you can have things come in and out that, you know, touch on something we're familiar with in reality, but sort of gives it a new spin or a remix in Star Wars. So aesthetically, it is jarring, like compared to the rest of Tatooine. Tatooine's a place where it's like old but new. Everything feels timeless. They feel like really new. Like their spears are colorful, shiny. They stick out way more than anything else. What all the bikers are wearing, you know, it feels like a little too sort of fancy for everything else there. But maybe that's the point. And if nothing else, I will admit it is fun. And I like having fun in Star Wars. I like when something pops up and I'm like, I wouldn't have done this, but that's why it's good. You know, like it's fun. So, yeah, I'm sure we'll touch more on like the biker stuff in a bit, especially later on in the episode. I guess Boba's call to make them his protection is again Boba Fett extending that understanding of like respect he has for people. Like, well, if you guys feel you need to do this to survive, maybe, and if no one is willing to give you a job, then fine, I'll do it. You know, like I'll meet you halfway. That's how I interpreted his decision anyway. But it was definitely like, you know, are these guys really going to do much to protect you until, you know, later on we see what they actually do to do that. So yeah.
No, Parks, I think you bring up a great point about them being shiny and colorful in such a contrasting environment. One of the things for the series that I kept saying was these trailers look so bland, and one of them we actually get to see that blue motorcycle with that girl on top of it, and everybody was like, "What the heck is this?" And I was like, "I'm gonna be honest with everyone. This is the most fascinating thing and most eye-appealing thing that we've seen so far." So when these people show up, I was like, all right, I'm in. I listen. Yes, it was very off-putting at first. But the way, what's the character that you mentioned earlier, Lortha Peel? When he was talking about cybernetics and stuff like that, half machine, half man, I was like, all right, there's that cliche Star Wars line. All right, cool. But I was getting fascinated because those reminded me of some concepts in Star Wars Aftermath, in that trilogy, and some of the things they do with droids and stuff. I'm like, interesting. So I thought they were going to pull something, you know, from that book or that series or from the comics.
But yeah, I felt very comic booky to me, and I love that. I love when Star Wars just like expands into things that as we saw with Black Krrsantan, which we'll talk about in a bit. But I love when Star Wars relies on stuff like that just to get out of the comfort zone of just what's known in Star Wars, like the movies and stuff. I love when all these different people are tuning in that haven't seen the animation shows. They're tuning in now and seeing like Ahsoka Tano. Well, in Solo we saw Darth Maul, but it's just like, I don't know, that felt like another callback to like something that we would see in like a comic book or hear about in the Star Wars book. So for me, I ate it up. It also reminded me of Boba Fett going up to these biker gang and recruiting them. Kind of reminded me of like, because at first it's like, why should he care about them? But it reminded me of how Aura kind of saving him in a way and rescuing the wretched, and I felt like he was doing the same thing here, and he wanted to give these people an opportunity because maybe someone gave him an opportunity beforehand. Aura singing stuff ended badly, but still I think that he was relying back on his roots. So yeah, I don't know, for me, I woke up on Twitter, opened Twitter up, saw, and everybody was crying about colorful bikes, and I'm like, what a day, huh? But yeah, for me, I don't know. Like I think they're very interesting characters. I love that the bikes basically reflect their personality. And listen, they could have come from anywhere in the galaxy, but this was Tatooine. Mos Espa was probably just a pit stop for them, and they just stuck around. For what reason, we don't know. But yeah, I just like them. I don't really have a big issue on them or big thing to say, but I did like how, in a way, they were used as a tool to humanize more of Boba's character, and it was just another extension of that. And I know Ari and I talked a bit we watched the episode last night together, and we talked a bit about the biker gang back and forth, and it's just lots of things to talk about to them. I'm interested in how they're going to play out later in the story, but I think this episode handled them really well, because they weren't like, oh, now we're going to make this cool gang the main characters of the episode, Yeah. It just, they fit.
Yeah, I was going to say, you better bring that up, because it's a good point you made last night.
Oh, right. So listen, if y'all remember, so these are kind of like the outcasts, your outcasts. They're just standing, doing hooligan things on the outside and stuff, while the civilized people are more inside and running their business and such. Well, I remember Stranger Things season 2. They did something like this. So the social outcasts in Stranger Things season 2, they had their own episode. The whole story revolved around these characters, rather than the characters being added to the story to contribute to the character of Eleven. And here, I think Star Wars handled it really well, where they were contributing to Boba Fett's character. It wasn't like, oh, it's a nice flashy, like, let's just spend time with them, and Robert Rodriguez was gonna give his hand and be like, oh, I'm gonna do something that I want to do for a bit. Nope, he still stood respectful to the Star Wars space, and like I said, had these characters lend into Boba Fett's character, and yeah, we just got to see him like recruit these guys on the fly, and I'm interested in how they'll play out later, but yeah, they had me hooked on these guys. I'm interested.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even though I definitely wasn't vibing with them this episode, I really love the boldness that Rodriguez is going with, like, to do something like this and have some really like extravagant characters who are just very different. Like, I appreciate him trying to do something different, sort of like what Parks was saying. And like, even though I'm not liking them now, as I said, I'm just going to give them time. So hopefully it pays off, and by the end of the series we're going like, oh, okay, got to get behind the biker gang. So yeah, anyway though, let's move on to the flashbacks. The flashbacks kind of took a backseat this episode. They were still very important, however, compared to episode 1 and 2. We only got around 5 to 10 minutes, but yeah, Mike, I'm just going to throw to you immediately on these ones.
Beautiful. Flashback. Listen, as I said earlier, in my overall take on the episode, I love that they were self-aware that how we would be reacting, because we all loved the flashbacks last week, but last week felt like a nice cap on them. We got to see Boba Fett get his cool gaffy stick, got to see his sacred robes, and it's like, all right, cool, you guys connected the lines. That's what you guys wanted to do. Fell for that. Now let's get back into the modern day and see what's going on. So when we were going into the past, I was like, oh no. I was like, no, don't ruin it, because we left on such a good note. I thought the Pyke thing was interesting. I thought the whole Pyke thing was resolved, but I guess not. I guess they're going to be a factor, maybe the main bad guys here. But I'm very, like I said, I was just eating up all the interactions and talking about the gangs and this land and our territory. I was eating all that up. But the main thing here is the Tuskens died. The group died. So I don't know. I've seen a lot of. I think that should be the talk on Twitter. Forget the bike gang. Forget the colorful bikes. Let's talk about this Tuskens dying. So I don't know. That really, really moved me, and I felt so. Like I said, I never cared about Boba Fett. Never cared about Tusken Raiders. But I've already cried over the two, in 2 weeks, and I'm gonna cry even more. But geez, the Tusken Raiders, when that scene played out, I was like hit. I was probably on the verge of tears just because of how moved I was last week, and then just seeing him coming back to the camp, and then all of them being wiped out. I was like, God, that was very painful. But yeah, that's my take on the Tusken Raiders. Parks, what did you think?
You know, I like you said with the sort of the format of the flashbacks up to this point. Last week was a huge surprise. After the first episode, you know, sort of figuring like, okay, like, you know, these flashbacks are interesting, but I hope they're not a regular thing. And then last week, you know, like I said, huge surprise in terms of what that gave us, just not even in terms of understanding the Tuskens better, but characterizing Boba better and understanding the journey that he's had up to the modern day. When we were cutting back to tank, you know, I was really hoping this episode would be full on modern day, and if it was going to have a flashback, it would have to be something really important. Well, it was pretty important. You know, I think there are like maybe at least two different camps I saw on Twitter about the Tuskens after last week, in that, you know, I really hope after everything we've discovered about them, we don't have to see them die tragically or anything like that. Versus another camp that was like, well, what happens to them? Like, you know, like Boba Fett's by himself when we see him in Mandalorian. Like, does he just leave them? Like, clearly something has to happen to them. And I was sort of figuring something bad would happen to them, but I personally hoped it wouldn't have happened this soon. I really would have wanted to see maybe just a little bit more with them. Maybe that speaks to just how attached I was to them after last week. But even still, going into this, the way they handled it was just incredible. Like the shot where Boba like walks, you know, over the horizon, and it sort of cranes out, and you see just all of the destruction, and it's slowly pulling back. I was just like, man, like you really get that full encompassing tragedy of what happened to them. And once again, sort of speaking to, I wished it hadn't happened this soon, if at all. You know, part of me really wanted to believe like this, you know, what has happened to the Tuskens so many times in the past, you know, Anakin in Attack of the Clones, slaughtering them like animals, as he said. Wish that wouldn't happen again, but with sort of what they've set up in the flashbacks here with the other biker gang, what are they called? The Krrsantan Striders.
Something like that.
Yeah, running around, and the Pykes probably, you know, not being happy about what happened with the train. It was bound to happen. But yeah, the music during that bit was incredible. The editing, the long meditative shots, Boba burning, you know, all of the Tusken belongings, including what looked like the gaffy stick he had just made, which to me I thought was a show of respect of, you know, this is part of the life that I lived with you. If you know, I can't have that life with you anymore, I can't have this thing, this gaffy stick. So yeah, it was handled very well. Very sad to see, and I wished we had a little bit more with that at the end, some bit more resolution before we jump back to what was quite honestly a very jarring jump to the modern day. But I'm sure there's more to the story than what we've seen. I have a feeling, you know, some people were pointing out that you don't see, I think the one sort of Tuscan like warrior lady that we
Yeah,
saw.
the warrior, or we didn't see the child either. So yeah.
Right.
Right.
And so there is hope that we might see them at some point, and even then, I'm sure wherever the flashbacks go next, if we continue to see them, it will explore how Boba Fett reacted to this and what he did in response to it. But yeah, it was a devastating thing to see, and just a real shame we couldn't have spent more time with them first.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I want to harp on something that you were bringing up about the Tuscans real quick. Yeah, I saw people, and this is a valid point. It's like you have the indigenous tribe here in the episode, or in these episodes, or just in general, that trope of an indigenous tribe takes somebody out, an outsider, trains them, and then moves them on to their next step, or they become of the tribe. But then it turns out they're the only sole survivor. So it's like, for them to harp on that trope, I did feel a little like, oh, I guess. I mean, listen, they wrote it very well where I was like, I mean, I did have that little small tinge of like, oh, I guess, but I was more sad. So the writing was there. They had a whole episode where we were like rooting for the Tuscans. So when, you're talking about that amazing shot of Boba walking up, yeah, I was just, again, moved, but this time I was very sad, and I was like, oh man, I'm about to cry. But now looking back, it's like, yeah, that probably wasn't the best to rely on that trope, just because it's been done so many times, and it's just like, well, now they're all gone. Right, well, and as Parks, as you said, I would have loved to spend, even though I was like hesitant again, going back, diving in, when he was on that bantha, I was like, oh no, I'm in. I don't care, I'm in. I'm right.
Yeah.
We're back in the thick of it. I'm back again with the Tuscans. Like, let's go on another adventure if we want. So, yeah. I know, Ari, you were talking a bit about the flashback stuff. What you think, even before the Tuscan stuff, what did you think of that shot again, or the extended shot of Boba on Camino and looking at his father leave?
Yeah, I was definitely going to bring that up because it's the third time in a row we've seen Camino in the flashbacks, and I think it was pretty much the exact same flashback from episode 2. So I'm like, is there some serious significance to Boba watching Jango fly away in the oh man, I don't even know what to call it. I don't want to start any debate, so I'll just say in Boba's ship. Yeah, I don't know, like, very curious to see what's going on there. I think maybe something from Boba's childhood is potentially driving him in the present day or the flashbacks. Like, I'm really just unsure, but I mean, without even speaking about what it could add to the story, I'm just loving seeing Attack of the Clones, themes sort of on this, not themes, but like style on the screen again. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is awesome. But I don't know if it's something to do with the water or, because they've harped on about how Tatooine used to be an ocean, and Boba's like, well, I used to live on a planet that was complete water or whatever. So I don't know if that's where the significance is. But yeah, no, just really curious into what that decision is. And just wanted to quickly add on to the Tuscan talk. Yeah, like, just what an absolute tragedy. I think we were talking about shots. The shot I absolutely love is Boba holding his banthas, like the collar or whatever it is, walking away with the whole burnt up campsite behind him, the fire that he lit. And I was just like, oh man. And there was even another shot of, it was kind of a side-on shot of his face, and you could just see like tears in his eyes. Reminded me of, no spoilers at all, but of a shot in Spider-Man No Way Home. And I was like, wow, okay. Like, I really felt that like tear-jerking sort of feeling that he was having. So I was like, yeah, but I do agree with you, Mike, about that trope of like the indigenous tribe gets wiped out off screen. But I'm praying the child and the warrior have got to come back. I'm telling you, they were too significant to not show. Like, if they're going to significantly pan down to the leader, they would have definitely done the same for the child and the warrior. Not to say they're alive, but I think we'll definitely see their fate in coming episodes, whether it is they're alive or they've passed. But yeah, what do you guys think of all this Camino stuff, though?
Listen, my theory is they just wanted something to add to the B-roll footage at the beginning of the first episode. And, you had Camino there, and they built all these, like, cool sets, CG sets and stuff. And they're like, well, we got to reuse them, or we got to use them up. No, I'm just kidding. But haven't really thought about it too much. I thought we were gonna see Kamino once, to be honest, or maybe even twice, and then we got this extended shot of a young Boba Fett looking at his father leave. Yeah, I want to see where this goes. If that's had some type of like emotional impact on him, because I mean, it does kind of ring some bells of like, when your parents had to leave for something or work. I remember when I was young. I was a youngin', and my parents would leave to work, and it was just kind of sad. It was like, oh, like, well, they'll be back later. So, and I was left with either my grandma or something, and just watching them leave. We've all had that, So maybe they're just trying to explore that again, humanizing Boba Fett, or as you were saying, there's probably like some overarching significance to it. So, Parks, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this.
If I could perhaps apply any sort of meaning to the repeated use of that shot, I think it maybe does a couple things. One is it reminds the viewer of like the circuitry of, this is like the beginning of Boba's journey. Modern, like where we're seeing him now is the present, like the end, or like up to now. But also, and then there was an interesting thing, I thought, how much they emphasized water at the beginning of the episode with the watermonger, and I grew up on a planet of water. Tatooine was once water, and then he sees this here. So, and I guess that in a sense is also adding to the circuitry of it. Like he grew up on a planet filled with water. Where he finds himself now used to be an ocean. So it's again, more interesting circuitry. Something else there I thought about when you were mentioning the the sort of seeing your parents leave for work, Mike, as is the idea of maybe Boba Fett being left alone, or being in some ways like an outsider left to fend for himself, and that among like the Tuskens, he is an outsider. That to Mos Espa now in the present day, he's essentially, compared to the way that everyone else lives their lives, compared to sort of the laws and procedures everyone sort of understands about what it's like living under daimyo, he is essentially an outsider. He's on his own. So I guess it's just emphasizing that and trying to emphasize the isolation of Boba Fett, perhaps. And if nothing else, it is a cool shot. Like having it sweep by and he's running and it's raining and the ship is like going off and away from Kamino. It's cool, and like again, as with many aspects of the show, it is nice to see them not trying to ignore or leave out any parts of Star Wars, just embracing all of it for what it is and what Boba Fett's been through. And
oh, definitely.
And to one thing to touch on again with the warrior and the child from not seeing their bodies, the reassurance I have is that this is a Dave Filoni production, and that he is very keenly aware of the sort of like analyze every frame Star Wars fans that watch this stuff. And so if they made an effort to show the other like members of the tribe that we know that have died, but not them, I think that means there's more to that. And if not, I would be surprised.
Yeah.
So
oh, definitely.
We definitely spent a lot of time with Boba and that kid during the first episode.
Yes.
And in the second episode with him and that one
warrior.
The warrior. So it's, what? As you said, it's just there's too much there to be left unknown and stuff. So I think we'll definitely at least know their fates or something.
Yeah, I think as well, something we actually kind of forgot to touch on, but when Boba's going and looking at the wreckage, he sees the emblem of the Nikto Sand Riders. I'm not sure how we're referring to them, but so I'm very interested to see how he's going to follow up on that, because he walks into Mos Eisley, talks to the Pike leader, and he's like, okay, well, it's almost as if like he's saying, well, one of you can decide who's going to protect us, and we'll pay whoever you guys seem to decide. So I don't know if like the Pike leader got in touch with them, was like, oh, hey, by the way, like the Tuskens might protect us instead, and then they were like, okay, and then that's why they went and wiped out that village. Like, I'm not sure, but either way, I think Boba is definitely looking to get some revenge, I would say. And maybe it was in revenge of Boba going and beating them all up at Toshi Station in episode 2. Like, because the motive right now, I'm kind of curious, but I'm sure there is one. But yeah, what do you guys think is going to happen? Is Boba going to go like seriously dark for a moment here and get some crazy revenge on these guys, or what do you reckon? Parks, you look like you have something loaded up.
Yeah. I feel like, yes, there is the sort of trajectory here is Boba Fett will aim to do something dark. And if nothing else, I don't think it would feel right if he didn't take some sort of action in response to this, because it has been escalating over the last few episodes in like the flashbacks. What I think will happen though, and what they might do in a future episode, now that we have the Pykes sort of resurfacing in the present, is we might see a potential failure that Boba Fett experiences in the flashbacks to do something about the Pykes, to right this wrong once and for all. And that will create a conflict for him in the present of, I failed once, I can't fail now. And understanding how he has to work through that the right way, you know, will sort of be his arc in the present. Yeah, it is interesting. And I always, it's just fascinating hearing these sort of like, I guess you could say the politics of Tatooine of like, oh, like, well, you know, we are already paying for this gang, we're not going to pay you, you know, like, so it's very interesting.
Before we move on, I just want to point out two things real quick and have a quick chat about it. There was two sort of very interesting Easter egg / cameo moments. We see, you know, in Mando chapter 5, we see all the stormtrooper heads on the Pykes. And now we see the guy who did that doing that in the flashbacks as Boba's in Mos Eisley, and that I thought was cool. But this other one really rubbed me the wrong way. We see Peli Moto walking in the background. I know Mike's gonna come at me for this, but I love Peli. Let me just put it out there. I love Peli.
I also love Peli.
Yeah, this is how I really hate cameos that are like this. They're just very forced. They're there for no reason. She's just walked in the background and then, like, you know, everyone's like, oh, look. But I'm just like, it's taken away from what's happening. Like, Boba's walking through Mos Eisley and I'm seeing this. And I'm like, I love a good cameo. I love a good cameo, okay? But this was just, like, in your face. Like, oh, it's like, make sure you check out that character from The Mandalorian. And I was just not vibing with it. As much as I love Peli, and I'll admit at the time, I was like, hey, it's Peli. But then watching it the second time, I was like, oh, jeez, I really threw that in there, didn't they? It was like seeing R5 in chapter 5 of The Mandalorian. I was like, this is a stretch. But Mike, go on then.
Listen, I just want to say, I did not at all feel like it was in your face. It was literally in the background. It was just in the background, like it was like blink or miss. It was blink or miss, literally, because I didn't notice it until the last second. I'm like, oh shoot, that was Peli. That was her in the pits at the pit droids. Listen, if she had come up to them and be like, hey, where y'all headed, that would have been in your face. But the fact that it was her just in the background, that literally felt to me like we were back in Attack of the Clones and watching some of the previous established concepts in Phantom Menace going on in the background, like the markets and stuff like that. That felt like we were back in that environment. So for me, it was not up in your face. It was literally in the background. It was blink or miss, or what's that expression? Blinking, you miss it. So that's literally what it was. So it didn't bother me. But if she had come up to Boba or whoever was during that scene and been like, hey, where y'all headed? Y'all need a fix? It just would have took me out for sure. Yeah. For sure. So Parks, can you agree with me here?
I agree. And I gotta say, like, to me, everything you're describing, Ari, just immediately reminds me of like two scenes in Rogue One. The one where you see R2-D2 and C-3PO, and it's like, yes, you don't need to be here. And then the other one being the two people from the Mos Eisley Cantina. I forget.
Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. And that's what you're describing. This is like, it's not. It's okay. It's fun. Like.
Thank you, Parks. Thank you.
No, I see what you're saying. I'm probably being overly critical, but I was just
You
like,
are.
it was the fact that it was from like the how would you describe, like the neighboring show.
Sure,
Like, I was
sure.
just like,
But
I
you
don't
didn't-
know,
You didn't
like.
find the stormtrooper helmet set up to be in your face?
No, because that actually did something. That showed the time period we were in, and it explained because in the flashbacks, the Empire has just been wiped out, and that's a good sign of the time, saying Empire's gone, whatever. So I thought that actually made sense and provided something. But
No,
the
for
Pelly
sure.
thing, look, it didn't throw me off or anything. I'm not gonna
Yuck my
go
yuck.
any further than having a little complain about it on the podcast.
You're not gonna
But
yuck
like,
my yuck.
I was just like, okay, I don't know about this. Like, that's just personally how I don't like my cameos. And yeah, it wasn't as in your face as like the ones Parks are talking about. You're definitely right, and it probably in your face. I'm describing it wrong. It wasn't quite like
Sure.
that, but I was just like, okay, like all the Star Wars fans can be like, oh look, but anyway, we've probably talked about this for too long. let's move on. Anyway, Black Krrsantan. Parks, I'll be interested when we throw to you to hear what your history with this character is, if you've read him in the comics or not. But we got a huge jump scare straight off the bat. Boba's in his back down, then we see some Wookiee arms come and grab him by the throat. This fight scene was interesting. I don't know how I felt about it. It was like it felt very comic book like. I love Black Krrsantan. Probably saying that wrong again, but yeah, like it felt a bit awkward at first, like when he was just like grabbed him. I think he was trying to suffocate him or something. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And then the teenagers come in and start like trying to shoot him, and I was like, okay, there's 4 teenagers taking on this gladiator Wookiee. Like I just don't even. This is bizarre, but like I was enjoying it in that sense, being like, this is bizarre, but I'm kind of vibing with it. And then yeah, just a cool scene. But what do you think, Parks?
Well, start with my history with Black Krrsantan. It reaches about as far back as last week. I did not know who he was. I don't read the newer comics very much. But I'm glad they included him. He's very cool. And I remember when he walked like onto the scene in the last episode, I literally blurted out like, "Oh, he's scary." Like he just looks terrifying. And everything about this fight with him and Boba, I love that it's framing that. Every shot cutting to him is him growling or him looking like, he's got the volition to kill in his eyes. Yeah. And it was great. It was a bit of a vulnerable moment for Boba. I do like those moments where it's like, okay, here we have a character without like their armor or their weapons. Like, how do they fare? So
Can I just say something with the weapons real quick? I didn't point this out. I'm not going to take credit for it. I actually saw it on Stars Explains review. However, when Boba is reaching for a weapon while he's been thrown to the ground, he's trying to grab his Mandalorian weapons, but he's fumbling around with them and he can't quite get it. And then Krrsantan comes and picks him up, and he can't get there. But then I think his like more Tusken Raider like weaponry is on the other side of the room, and he's very easily able to like grab that and fight with it. So I'm like, oh okay, like that. Like it shows that I think Alex was saying like it's not about his what he's inherited. That's not how he's going to win. I guess with inheritance, he's going to win with the way he's forged his own path, and it's just a good sort of like metaphor and just good symbolism for that. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I just really want to put that out there.
That's a great point to bring up. And then they dropped him into the Rancor pit, and they kept panning over to like the cage, and I was like thinking about the recap at the beginning of this episode. I watched it, and they emphasized the Rancor's not there, and I'm like, so when we get to this scene, I'm like, did they get a new one off screen? But then we see in the next scene, like, oh, that's okay, that's what that is. But I was like, dude, like, I don't want to see this guy die right away. And thankfully, he doesn't. And hopefully we see him again before this season's over, because I enjoy this person, and I would like to see him maybe team up with Boba Fett or something along those lines. I mean, heck, he had that crazy looking rifle in the last episode. He didn't even get to use it. It'd be a shame if we hadn't seen him again and he didn't get the chance to use it. So
yeah, I feel like they're like emphasizing that Boba he's gonna have like some good karma, almost like letting Krrsantan go, and almost that could definitely come back to help him out in maybe fighting the Pykes in the finale or something like that. So I definitely think we're going to see some more of him soon. But Mike, how'd you fare with him this episode?
First of all, I wasn't expecting to see him or the twins until maybe episode 4, 5, or maybe even 5 and 6. So when Boba was coming out of the dream and we're like, okay, we're waking up now, we're going back into the present. Talk about a jump scare. I got so scared. I wasn't expecting that. Where I'm pretty sure I cussed out because I was like, what the? I just was not expecting that. So brilliant jump scare that they had there. I don't know if anyone else got scared, but I definitely jumped. I was like, whoa. Not because it was only 2 a.m. when I was watching it, but it definitely woke me up. I thought the brawl was really well done. It felt to me, if they didn't have Robert Rodriguez, and the editing style that he's notoriously known for, this fight could have felt really clunky. At times, it could have felt like it was just like somebody in a gorilla suit fighting, but it didn't feel like that at all. I think it was really nasty. It was brutal. Every time Black Krrsantan would grab Boba and throw him across the room, I freaking cringed because Boba was barefoot. He had no pants on. He had no shirt, and I was just like, "Ooh, that does not fare well." So I thought the fight was really well done, and I'm so glad that these steampunk, whatever you want to call them, teenagers, this bike gang, did not have the upper hand on Black Krrsantan. He swept the floor, and even though with their enhancements, they were no challenge for Mr. Black Krrsantan, or as some people know him as Santi. So I thought the way they took him down as well, where he didn't just fall into the Sarlacc pit. Fennec he was still like hanging on, and the way Fennec just grabs the blade from her weapon, and she just chucks it at him.
Oh yeah,
so well done. And I that's one of the way this fight was laid out. I think one of the strong points of this series is the writing, and you were saying about the teases of the Rancor. I just really love how self-aware this, or just how consistent actually, how this series is just so consistent with itself and plugging in all these things together and like remembering a line they said from episode 1 or whatever. So, and the whole gaffy stick thing, I totally love as well. I haven't watched Star Wars Explains Breakdown, but that's definitely the feeling I got. I was like, oh, that's cool. Great way to tie it in. And this series is very symbolic as well. So, dug that fight. But the thing is, y'all, I want to hear your take. Who let this man in? Everyone was talking yesterday when we watched it with friends, Ari and I. Everyone was like, "Did Fennec let him in? Who let him in?" And I was like, "Listen,
oh yeah,
Jabba's palace security is just non-existent, same with. So that's the thing they all share with each other. Bib Fortuna, Jabba, Boba, they all share the lack of security. Anyone can just stroll up in there, and the only security presence they have is 2 Gamorrean guards at the bay door. That's it. Other than that, it's anyone can stroll up in there. And so this was another one of those moments where it's like, they're like, how did he get in there? And it's like, have y'all seen Return of the Jedi? Have y'all seen have you seen when Boba strides in there and kills Bib Fortuna? I mean, come on. The only time it felt like I was in there and it felt like actually with a formidable security presence was in the Clone Wars movie. Besides that, nothing else.
Yeah. You could also just say, like, I don't know, Krrsantan's probably been to Jabba's palace many times. We've seen him there in the comics. Right. Just say he knew the layout, he knew how to sneak in, and sure. Whatever. Sure. You can make whatever you want up in your head if it's bothering you that much. Not you personally, Mike, but just listeners out there.
Yeah. For sure. So Fennec is not a traitor. I don't think she's a traitor. I just think, as Ari was saying there, Black Krrsantan's been there before, and plus it's not really hard to figure out, oh look, where does this big door lead? So and it's all good, as confusing as Jabba's palace may seem in the Battlefront 2 map and such, it's really not that confusing. So there you go.
Yeah. Also, just last thing on Black Krrsantan, I think a line that I loved from the Hutts was "Sell the Wookiee back to the gladiators." Just a little nudge at the fans that have read him in the comics. And also something that I don't know if this bothered me, probably am being very nitpicky here, but I know me and Mike did talk about it a bit last night. They kind of acted like they didn't really know each other in the exchange they had when he was letting him go, because he was like, let me give you some advice, bounty hunting or whatever it is. I'm like, you guys know each other. Like, you've been on a mission together. Like, so it's sort of a bit, I understand, like, not everyone's read that comic. Probably like 1% of the people watching the show have actually read it, so it's not that big a deal. But I was sort of like, felt a little off. I don't know, Mike, what did you think of it? Because I know you've read the comics.
Listen, I didn't need like a hint, like, let's beat you over the head that they know each other. Because I mean, come on,
Yeah.
it's all good if they don't. Like, we can make the inference. However, there was that one line where it's like, take it as me, as a former bounty hunter, and I was just like,
It's like, he knows. He knows.
Y'all know, y'all were standing right next to each other. However, it does take me back to him trying to always just fend for Black Krrsantan, because in the comic, now that I'm thinking about it, he goes back. Vader tasks him with finding the rebel pilot who blew up the Death Star, which is Luke Skywalker. Spoiler. And he's like, "What about Black Krrsantan?" And he goes, "Oh, I have another job for him." And then so it's like, I feel like he's always trying to help Black Krrsantan out. But I just felt like another one of those moments here where he was like, take it as me. But I'm like, but y'all know each other. Just say something like, again, I don't need that like nudge moment where it's like, hey, we got some history together. Because listen, in that previous episode when they were just looking at each other, you could feel the history there.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like, it doesn't need to be this real in-your-face thing.
Right.
Everyone who read the comic can just look at the exchange they're having and be like, oh, like, here we go. Like,
Exactly.
how cool is this? But then in this, it's like, huh? Like,
Right.
you guys, like...
Right. Then
So,
that's
yeah.
when it felt like, all right, what's going on here? Do they not know each other or what? But I'm sure that they're... It was just like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about it too deeply because I don't want to get hurt. But listen, if they just had another one of those moments where Boba was just... I mean, obviously, Black Krrsantan is very intimidating. So when he was looking at him, but you could also just tell that there's history between the two. So everything but that one line is making me second guess some things, but again, not gonna overthink it. Just gonna be like, you know what? It was just a cool moment of brotherly advice. So there we go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, let's talk about the Hutts real quick because they had a small appearance, and I mean, it looks like they're kind of gone from what we're seeing. Like, they're going back to Hutta, as they said. They don't want war. They said Tatooine is a worthless rock. And then they, of course, apologize and give Boba a gift, which we'll talk about in a second. But what do you think, Parks? Are we done with the Hutts here?
I want to say no, because for no other reason other than as I was watching the episode, I was thinking about like, oh man, like they really like made a whole deal out of their appearance in the last episode.
Yeah,
like this is a big deal. Like everywhere where Boba Fett can hardly turn anyone's head walking down the street, here are the Hutts, and everyone's like scared of them. For them to be like, you know, we're sorry, we were lied to, and then for them to leave, I don't think we're done with them. Personally, I hope the Hutts are not done, but right now, like, we don't really have any sort of much to go off of in terms of, like, you know, what's there for them to come back to. You know, like they said, Tatooine's a worthless rock. So
yeah. Well, they seemed like, we're going to talk about it more in a bit when we get to them, but they seemed almost like, oh, it's like they just couldn't be bothered dealing with the Pykes, because I do not buy for a second that the Hutts are intimidated by the Pykes. Like, from what we've seen in Clone Wars, I would not buy that for a sec. But I could definitely see them being like, well, Tatooine is a worthless rock anyway, and we don't want war. It's bad for business. We can't be bothered. We're out. In saying that, though, I do think they're out, but I completely agree. I would love to see them again, because I thought they were, like, they perfectly fit this story. It makes complete sense that they would be around and wanting to reclaim Jabba's territory and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know, Mike, what do you think?
Listen, they're not going anywhere. They literally last week they told in the last episode, they said, oh, killing is bad for business. And what happens? They sent Black Krrsantan to kill Boba Fett. So it's like,
yeah, that's true. It's true.
We're gonna see them again. They ain't leaving. They're just probably going to regroup their forces or whatever they need to do. But it's like, why are you going to leave? Why do you have this sudden change of heart when you just sent one of your bounty hunters to kill Boba Fett? So it's like, oh, now so you wanted to kill Boba Fett and what? So I don't know.
And now it's like, sorry, have a Rancor.
Right. So I don't know if there's something larger at play here, that is really going to intimidate him rather than just the Pykes, or if they just have like they're playing a larger game. So I'm interested. Again, there's a lot of. I love that this episode started picking up on those, because when we reviewed the first episode, I was like, man, there's a lot of intrigue here. And it finally felt like this episode was picking up on those leads. So if the ones they picked up, they're continuing, but they're adding more stuff in there where I'm just like, where is this gonna go? Hopefully it's not disappointing. But yeah, I'm all in for whatever these Hutts are gonna do. But they're going. Listen, they're not going anywhere. They're the Hutts, and as you were saying, they're not intimidated by some Pykes. No way.
Yeah, no, definitely.
It could be a thing where, you know, like maybe the Hutts see this conflict brewing, and want it to sort of are going to use it as a way to maybe weaken Fett or the Pykes, and then they can storm in, and who knows what they could gain from that, you know? So they may be out of the presently out of the game, but yeah, like you said, if they're clearly not upstanding people. And are said they were going to, you know, killing is bad for business, and then they did that very thing, or tried to do that very thing. So, and for a second as well, I was really expecting, after that whole Rancor scene, for Danny Trejo to say some sort of like foreboding line about like, just wait, like the time will come for us to kill Boba Fett or something, like, and then you go, oh shit, like the Rancor is gonna turn on them. I don't know how this works, you know. So, but it wasn't that at all. It was actually quite wholesome, that Rancor scene. So
yeah. Well, yeah. Let's talk about it, because I think it was probably my favorite part of the episode. Like, because it was just so unexpected, so random. For me personally, I felt that like Boba's all of a sudden just started falling in love with this Rancor, and like he's even like, when he's patting it, he's like, oh, is this the spot you like or whatever? And I was like, oh, this is so weird, but I just love it. But yeah, so it comes in and they're saying like, oh, the Rancor is depressed, and I'm like, what is happening? The Rancor is depressed, you're telling me? What am I watching right now? Anyway, and then Danny Trejo, so I don't know how to say his name, but he's like he's explaining how the Rancor is like an emotionally complex creature and all this, and I'm like, wow. Like, I just love how Filoni, Favreau, Rodriguez are making like just these things that we saw, like Tusken Raiders, and then they're being like, no, there's actually so much more to them or whatever. And I'm like, I just dig that idea of, just in general, like, you know, don't judge a book by its front cover. Like, there's so much more to, you know, people and creatures and whatever than you might think. So I love that they're doing that. But yeah, the fact that Boba wants to become friends with the Rancor and like ride it around, like, I mean, like, that's just awesome. It immediately reminded me of the High Republic comic cover with Ava Chris sitting on top of the Rancor holding a lightsaber. I'm like, are we going to have a moment like that with Boba? And, oh yeah, he's even like, Danny Trejo saying like, oh yeah, they can be very loving, all this sort of thing. And I'm like, this is nuts, but I'm digging it. And Boba even mentions like, oh, I've ridden Beast 10 times its size. And at first I was like, what is he talking about? And then I saw a post on Instagram being like, talking about the holiday special, and how in the holiday special he rides that massive beast, like that dinosaur looking thing. And I was like, oh, I just love the creators of this show. Like, but yeah, and even mentions like the witches of Dathomir used to ride them through the forest, all this stuff. So just so many cool little shout outs, nods and whatever. And I just love the direction this is going. And, you know, Parks was just saying, at the end, Danny Trejo goes like, don't worry, he'll be back. Like, honestly, I actually did think for a second, like, don't worry, he'll be back. Like, what do you mean he'll be back? Like I did watch it again and was like, oh, okay, it seems like he's just saying like, oh, he'll be back. Like, don't worry, like, your master will be back. But I wouldn't completely discount the Rancor trying to eat Boba or something in the next episode. I think it's very unlikely, but I think there's just that tiny little chance. But I think it was probably just a wholesome moment. But yeah, what do you guys think of this Rancor scene? Because I loved it.
Danny Trejo saying the witches on Dathomir. That was, I mean, holy cow. First of all, listen, when I saw Danny Trejo, I was like, wow, I feel not only is this feeling like one of Robert Rodriguez's, earlier 2000 projects, like maybe Spy Kids or whatnot, in a good way, when you just sprinkled Uncle Phoenix up in there, it just for me brought everything full circle, and I was like, it felt like I was transported back to the early 2000s era with this episode. But hearing him say the Witches of Dathomir, it was just such a deep cut reference where I'm like, you have someone in pop culture like Danny Trejo saying Witches of Dathomir, like, come on, it can't be any better than that. And that, I love that because it was a nod to EU fans of how, Dathomir came to be, with all these Dathomir witches riding, the Night Sisters riding Rancors around. And then you have, obviously the Clone Wars side of, everyone coming to know the Witches of Dathomir as the Night Sisters. So, yeah, that was such a beautiful nod. And as Ari, as you said, love the creators of the show. And, yeah, this whole Mandoverse is what I call this. Boba Fett, obviously the Mandalorian.
The Favreverse.
The Favreverse. I call it the Mandoverse, but that's cool because the Mando's the flagship show. But it's just it's a beautiful nod to, and it's a beautiful love letter, not just to Star Wars, but like the original trilogy itself. Like there's just so many like the Rancor, things expanded upon like that in a beautiful way. That's like, wow, you really could have done this in a comic, but you're bringing some of these subject matters up into the limelight, like about Rancor's origins and stuff, and how they bond to their master. And you get a beast like a Rancor, and you have a beast like Boba Fett, and you're just humanizing them. So I thought Boba being pitted with the Rancor was just a beautiful like parallel to each of their characters. It's like there's more than meets the eye. So yeah, that was very poetic. Love the symbolism with the Rancor. And yeah, I'm just a big fan of the writing of the show. I didn't need another Rancor in Jabba's palace, but it's really nice that they brought another one back, and now it's going to be really bonded with Boba Fett, or at least we hope. But Parks, yeah. Rancor, are you a Rancor fan? Did you get all the deep cut references? What are your thoughts?
Witches of Dathomir for sure. That was cool. It immediately reminded me of Star Wars Galaxies. If you guys ever played that game or seen footage from that game, you could see like Night Sisters riding around Rancors in that game. It was cool. But yeah, Danny Trejo, love that guy. Big fan of like the Machete Kills films. So like just seeing him was great. But yeah, and I do really enjoy, you sort of touched on this, Ari. I think a great thing the show presents is that things that we've traditionally perceived in Star Wars to be maybe threatening or dangerous or untrustworthy are actually capable of like changing or being compassionate or being loving. The Rancor, big example of that, but also the Tuskens and even to an extent Boba Fett himself, apart from how he's been characterized in the past to how he's characterized now. And yeah, like I think that's just one of the beautiful sentiment that comes through here, and Boba sort of wanting to make a genuine connection with this creature, being like this really small, ultimately unnecessary moment to the plot, but like a great character building moment, and showing some of that humanity of Boba Fett. I love the bit where 88 comes in the room and is like, you're needed, and he's like, I'm in the middle of something. Like, this is more important. Me bonding with this creature is more important than anything you could bring up to me. So yeah, it was really wholesome.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I it felt very C-3PO, that 88 moment where like Boba's having like this serious connection with the creature, and then the annoying droid just comes in, it's like, Master, I have news for you, or like whatever it was. So I was just like, yeah, no, absolutely picked up on those vibes for sure.
I want to say again, I just love like the just something that everyone else can just like glance over and be like, ooh, a Rancor, but then there's just people that can pick up on those symbolic moments. It makes everything much more impactful. I mean, I was watching again the Tusken Raider scene back in chapter 2, and you notice when he's I haven't seen anyone make this inference, but I was like, I'm gonna say it anyway. When Boba is being clothed by the Tuskens, he has his palms like facing up. And it's when you usually do that, you're like succumbing to like a higher power. So it's like, wow, he's like being he's respecting them and allowing them to be brought in. He's just being adapted into their group. And then when he's being dressed up by the droids, his hands are like palms facing down, like if he's presiding over people, holding that power. So I'm just like, man, this show, whether it's a Rancor or just movements and hand gestures like that, it's just everything. So I really, like I said, I really, really appreciate the writing in this. So give me more Rancor and Boba stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Let's hit our last major talking point, which is the Mayor and the Pykes. This is very interesting stuff. I'm keen to talk about this. So apparently Mos Espa has been promised to the Pykes almost by the Mayor. I didn't even realize he really had that sort of power, but that was sort of how it was getting phrased. And so we hear the Mayor is unavailable for 20 days, which is the news that 88 comes in to tell Boba, and Fennec and Boba go straight to the office or whatever. And the Major Domo is just up to his old classic ways. I honestly just love that guy so much. But yeah, he walks away, locks the door, and runs away on the speeder. And then they have this speeder chase. And now I've seen a lot of stuff online about this. Apparently people are finding very slow. All that. Honestly, it was one of the few things that I didn't really have an issue with it at all. I didn't feel like it was slow. Definitely felt like it was very tropey. It felt like it was trying to be the classic speeder chase, where they run into the painting and then they knock all the fruit over, and then it finishes with all the Melu runs coming over the Major Domo. So I'm interested to hear your guys' takes on that. But they the Major Domo says, well, yeah, he's with the Pykes, and so we sort of get confirmation of that. And then at the end of the episode, we get a huge squad of Pykes rolling up. Man, so I guess the Pykes are the villains of this show. I still feel like there's something more at play, but at first, I'm not gonna lie, there was a hint of disappointment in me. I'm like, really, the Pykes? And I'll tell you why. It's because to me, the Pykes are just so non-threatening. I've just never felt threatened by them, and that's because in Clone Wars, in the Mandalorian arc, where Maul's taking over Mandalore, he's getting all these criminal syndicates together, Black Sun, all these guys. And then the Pykes are just I think there was 3 of them. They just walk up to someone and go, we want to be a part of it too. So that's kind of just how I've always seen them, is just the guys that want to act like they're bad as well. That, yeah, we're real bad too. We want to be part of the bad things that are happening or whatever. So when it was okay, it looks like the Pykes are going to be the villains of the show, I was just I just don't know about that. However, watched it again and have thought about it more, and I'm like, you know what? This could be a great opportunity to turn my sort of thinking around. But no, the Pykes are a real scary dudes. They're running a whole sort of drug cartel and whatnot. So I'm fascinated by the choice, that's for sure. And if they are going to be the end game, then cool. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. But I still have a lingering feeling there is something just a little bit larger at play. I'm not saying Crimson Dawn. I know everyone is talking about Crimson Dawn. I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be that, but still have a feeling something's bigger. But I don't know, Parks, tell me what you're thinking.
Starting with the speeder chase there, I thought it was a lot of fun. To me, it felt like they were really showing off the production design and being look how many things we can throw in front of the screen, which was very entertaining. There was a bit where I was like, all right, this is going on a little too long for me, but it is, as it has been since the first episode, is just really beautiful seeing the streets of Mos Espa filled with all of these weird, wonderful aliens. See all the different ships and details. No surprise, it's a feast for the eyes. And I didn't not enjoy seeing that. I love Ralph McQuarrie references. I love when they go right through the painting. Yeah. And I saw someone point out in the actual painting, Luke's not there. So it's almost like the people who made the painting in the Star Wars universe were oh, let's get that stupid Jedi out of here. We don't like him, that was fun. And yeah, it did feel very comic, sort of the chase trope. But again, like, it's Star Wars. It should be fun. It doesn't have to be deathly serious. I know people were saying, like, oh, Boba Fett had a jetpack. Like, why couldn't he have caught up or something like that? And it's like...
maybe he was testing the biker gang out, like, seeing what they could actually do, you know? Because then as soon as they do, it's like they're only chasing, like, the mayor's major domo. Like, what's he really going to do? So then maybe he was, you know, testing the waters, and then he can just jet back at the end. So
that's a good point.
Right, no, totally. Yeah, so I had fun with it. It was fun. I'm not gonna put too much stock in it. And yeah, that Major Domo guy's great. And you know, like any time something from animation appears in live action, it's always like it sends a neuron fires in my brain of like, I know what that is. I feel really validated. And so just seeing the Melu run fruit, like
hell yeah.
Like, at first was one of my least favorite episodes of Rebels, but like all of those episodes from the show that, you know, people don't like the Puffer Pig or anything like that, are just now like my favorites because like they're just so wacky. Like
we're gonna do a whole other podcast on this because we wholeheartedly agree that episode is honestly could be my favorite Rebels episode. Like, I'm not joking.
It's so fun.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
for sure. And then the Pykes, yeah, I think you're right. And they've been in a lot of stuff lately. It made me think of their appearance in The Bad Batch, and then, of course, their appearance in Season 7 of The Clone Wars, and being like, is there some, like, long game here with the Pykes, and is this what that is? Is there something here, the Pykes? But ultimately, I guess it's just under, like, them adhering to the rules they've established in the Star Wars universe that spice is an extremely profitable, like, illegal trade, perhaps the most profitable one, and the people who run that are the Pykes. So that makes sense. And if it does, I hope, you know, if it doesn't lead anywhere bigger than that, I hope that the Pykes aren't necessarily like the main foe, but they're one of many foes Boba Fett will have to deal with by the end of the show. The idea that he will have to defend his reign from all these different factions. The Pike being perhaps the first one to escalate it to the next level, as he says at the end of the episode, or Fennec Shand says, like, they want to go to war, which is a really exciting tease.
Yeah, very exciting
for sure.
tease. No, that Parks, definitely agree with you on the chase scene. Listen, I prefer the animation chase scenes way more just because you could do stuff with it, but it definitely felt like how you were saying, like, look at all our stuff, and you know, they knew what they were doing because then even the music sounded quirky and fun, so I had a fun time with it. It was slow and whatever, like, not every chasing has to be like this thrilling action fight. It just felt like something maybe that we would have seen in like Indiana Jones or something to me.
Yes.
So that's the
for sure
I got out of it. So, and with the Pykes, listen, this is the first episode of the live action stuff. Well, we've only seen Pykes unmasked just now in live action in chapter 2, and I was like, I don't really mind it. I mean, it's definitely not cool how they look in Clone Wars, but I'll take it. This episode, I was like, like I really don't know what it was, but like it reminded me of all the Nemodian work with the little remote control prosthetics. It reminded me of that. It's like we haven't advanced from the Phantom Menace, like what? But it reminded me of how the Nemodians' mouths would move, and they were so like lethargic of movement sometimes, and it just really showed this time. Other than that, I just want to make that production note. Other than that, as you said, I hope they're like one factor that Boba has to face, like, you know, one machine, or one what would you say, like one part of a moving machine. I hope that's what it is. Just because it was kind of weird, like just them traveling through civilian transports. But I think you made a thing I want to harp on for a second. You made a good note, and it was about the Pykes. Like, you even read about, you know, I think it was in the book Poe Dameron Freefall that was released kind of a year ago or 2 years. It's going to be 2 years now. There was a blurb in there, now that I'm remembering, about the Pykes after the Empire had fallen. The Pykes, like, everything went in disarray. The Pykes no longer were number one or something like that. I have to find the blurb and get back to everyone on the podcast and repeat it. But holy cow, like I'm very, you know, Pykes are up there. They're a number one spot. So seeing them after the Empire falls and the New Republic is all but like not there, what's going on? So I'm really digging this. Like I feel like we're taking our first steps into looking at what's going on when now that we're in a transitional period and New Republic is not involved as they should be. So it's a free world, free market out there. So seeing the Pykes move in, it's kind of what I expected, and it's kind of what they alluded to in some things in Mandalorian and such. So I'm like I said, I'm intrigued. I'm hooked. They got the hook, line, and sinker, and I'm in. And listen, if the biggest complaint you have about this episode was about colorful bikes or a slow speeder chase, I don't know what to tell you. We just broke down an entire episode talking about the writing and all these different lines and what we thought about things. And if you could still just walk away and the only thing you take away is like, yeah, but colorful bikes, find a different show.
No,
find a different show.
You're
obviously
right.
This is not the show for you. Go somewhere else. Go watch Hawkeye. Go watch something that will interest you. But I'm ready for more Book of Boba Fett. When the credits started rolling, I was like, another episode. I'm in. The only pain thing, waiting a week, but I'm in. Like I said, I'm excited for what they throw at us, and I can't wait for episode 4.
Absolutely, and yeah, we've pretty much just broken down every little nook and cranny from that episode. But I mean, yeah, just to harp on what Mike was saying, what a stellar episode. Honestly, I probably was harsh on it thinking last night. Now that we've talked about it so much, sort of broken it down, I'm like, yeah, wow, this episode had a lot to offer. And as Parks was saying at the end, I think Fennec says like they're going to war, and then Boba says, "Then we will be ready." So I think whether that means like I'll be ready to ride my Rancor or like whatever it is, or
hopefully, yeah.
But yeah. Before we get into the Q&A, I just want to point out some real random little things that I just liked. Mike mentioned at the top, Fennec putting her feet up and eating that chicken leg or whatever it was. I just thought that was just the nicest vibe. Just what a nice aura Fennec has. She's just loving it. I know she's like the second in command or whatever to Boba, but I was like, she's loving it. And Boba kind of seems to think, oh, this is ridiculous. Look at all this food, whatever. Probably because he lived on watermelons or whatever they're called. But like, I loved that from Fennec. Just like, yeah, just keep the feet up. Have a good one. Parks, did you want to say something?
I would say, if I may demonstrate my Star Wars knowledge for a second, I believe what she was eating was a Nuna, which was...
Yep.
It reminded me of season 2 of the Clone Wars, like when Orn Free Ta is sitting at the table and he's having that big feast. I was like, yeah, it's still a delicacy all these years later.
All these years later.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, yep, that's where it's from. Because I was looking at it, I'm like, what? In what scene was this before? And you exactly that. Yep. We love Orn Free Ta.
Yeah.
Wait, what's his name? Orn Free Ta.
Free Ta.
Orn Free.
Yeah.
There we go.
Orn Free Ta.
There you go.
Oh man, he just got shot in Bad Batch.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to say was, in the last 2 episodes, me and Mike have talked about how much we love the titles with their double meanings and stuff. This one, and maybe Parks, you disagree, but I don't think this one does. It's called The Streets of Mos Espa. I don't know if they were talking about because Boba goes into the streets of Mos Eisley or something. Maybe they should call the episode like The Streets of Tatooine or something. Like, I don't know. I was kind of like, damn, like, because of the other 2 titles, I was like, those are so good, like the double meaning. It is like the most nitpicky thing to possibly say, but I was kind of like, damn, wish we had that double meaning.
No, yeah, it's definitely the one episode with the least sort of like double meaning applied to it, but at least it does have like a sort of nice parody with the last episode, the Tribes of Tatooine, the Streets of Mos Espa.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's true.
So, yeah, it works in that regard, I suppose.
Yeah, it felt like the Mandalorian episode title names, like the Jedi, the Marshal, or whatever. I was like, Streets of Mos Espa.
Straightforward as it can be. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Now it's time for questions. Listen, if you have any questions about the episode that you want answered or want to hear our take on, DM us at all_Star Wars or at Star Wars_exchange, and we might just answer your question or respond to the sticker tab that we throw up right after we watch the episode. All right, our first question comes from David King. He's a big fan of the podcast, by the way, and he asks, do you think the death of the Sand People is playing into tropes too much? We talked about this a little bit, but Parks, do us the favor about expanding a little bit into this. What are your thoughts?
So I am not an indigenous person, and so for me, I don't want to project the feelings of the actual sort of demographic that this storytelling decision most affects on that moment and say it's right or wrong. I do think it does play into the trope a bit, like you touched on earlier. Outsider coming into an indigenous clan becomes the only survivor. I think it was unfortunately bound to happen. Hopefully it will lead to some rich characterization with Boba, and I do hope there is sort of like some sort of consolation at the end of this, where, like we mentioned, some of the Tuskens survived, or perhaps at the end of all of this in the present day, Boba does something for the Tuskens to sort of like do justice to the injustice they've been dealt for a long time on Tatooine. But otherwise, yeah, I think with like an indigenous writer at the helm, the trope probably wouldn't have been used. So it is unfortunate that it was. I'm just glad the moment was handled with, I feel like, a good bit of reverence, and there was really strong creative choices being made in that moment with the camera and the editing and the music. Otherwise, yeah, it's probably where I think this episode might fall a little flat for lying on that.
Gotcha. Yeah, very, very
completely.
Well. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, shout out to David, big fan of the podcast.
Yeah, shout out to David, and actually has another question for us, and he asks, did Boba Fett write on his Tinder, good with animals? I think he did, David. Thank you. Our second question.
Actually, that's like literally. I saw a tweet this morning that was like, "This show may as well be called the Book of Boba's Pets," because like I saw it literally could be.
Really?
Anyway, sorry.
I would love to see him just every week a new creature comes and he's like, "Oh, right there, that's the soft spot." You know,
that's the spot.
I love that
yeah,
so
for
much.
real.
Yes. All right, our next question comes from Matt Kinch, and he asks, do you think the main villain in the show is going to be a greater threat beyond the Pykes and the Mayor? Ari, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously we touched on this, but I'm so 50-50 split on it. Like, I'm genuinely 50-50. I don't know if it's going to be the Pykes or something larger, but my personal hope is it is something larger at play. I couldn't tell you what I want. You know, it could be like some syndicate we've seen from Clone Wars or wherever. What I will say is I do hope the show remains with familiar criminal syndicates, because like I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I kind of feel like it's like we know who are the big bads in the galaxy. You know, if you were a big bad, we'd know about you from Clone Wars or Solo or wherever it was. You know, so it's like when they bring someone else in, they can be non-threatening because we already know, well, hold on, there's all these other syndicates who have all this power. Like, why should we feel threatened by these guys at all? So I do hope there's something larger at play. My hope is Crimson Dawn. I do hope they're going to bring Crimson Dawn into the show. However, if you've been keeping up with the comics, it's looking very unlikely, so I'm not going to get my hopes up too much. Ultimately, if I had to predict, I'd say the thing larger at play is going to be the Hutts coming back around for something, don't know what, but right. that's what I would hope and predict, but we'll see what happens. As I said, if it turns out being the Pykes, I'm on board, and let's see what they've got. So
what's the Black Sun up to these days?
Yeah, I was just wondering that because I
was thinking that.
Parks? Yeah.
I would love to see them in live action personally, just like the same species we see in the Clone Wars. But yeah, I don't know who else. It'd be cool if I don't know. I wish I had more extensive knowledge of criminal gangs in Star Wars. More than anything else, I want to see a bounty hunter show up more than like a criminal organization. But yeah, and that bounty hunter would be Cad Bane. But yeah.
Definitely. Cad Bane, Bosk, Kira. There's a few familiar faces.
Maybe Boba will be like, I need to defend my rule. I'm gonna call in some old friends.
Oh man, yeah.
Bosk, come on in.
Yeah.
I feel like such a.
What if we see like a reunited version of like the team from the train episode? I forgot they had a name, but man, that would be sick.
Oh yeah, they did.
Krait's Claw.
They did.
Was it Krait's Claw?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
it. Imagine they reunite to fight the Pykes or something. I mean, that's just a complete pipe dream, but man, that'd be sick.
That's a spy stream right there.
Anything is possible with Filoni.
Really, but I feel like such a fake Cad Bane fan because he's always been my favorite bounty hunter, and just because he's so menacing in that voice. Come on, who doesn't love that? But I don't know if I like. I don't know. I think that I'm invested in all the things going on here that I wouldn't care to see a reunion at this point. Do you feel differently, Parks?
Cad Bane doesn't have much of a character other than I feel like he's Boba Fett without the honor. He could come in as like a, this is who you used to be maybe sort of thing, like a cracked reflection. Though based on the Bad Batch, I don't know if Cad Bane's going to last all the way up to now. He seemed like he was the fight with him and Fennec Shand at Bad Batch, he seemed more like the old timer, where Fennec Shand was the new kid on the street. Mm-hmm. Though I would love to see a scene where Fennec Shand, very much in the way she like sort of turned up her nose at the Night Wind in episode 2, would be like, ugh, Cad Bane, that guy's like so cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And our final question for the day, Milo Corrigan asks, who will Boba go to help him fight the Pykes? Which we kind of just touched on, but Mike, what do you reckon?
I was hoping he was going to rely on the Tuskens. Listen, I felt that Train Heist was
same.
really awesome. And I'm like, oh, shoot, that would have been super cool if him and his new people would have gone up and taken them and taken against, the Pykes are moving into town, and he would have had a callback on to his old friends. I thought that was going to maybe be like the meeting point. And at the end, it was going to be like, oh, that's where the flashbacks meet up to or something like that. I don't know. That was a lingering thought that I had. That was like, oh, maybe he'll rely on the Tuskens later on and be like, remember me? And they're like, oh, our old son, our old brother, our old, whatever. So I thought they would probably like do something like that where he recruited the Tuskens, but that seems less likely unless the warrior's still alive and that kid. I feel like they might come into play in the modern day story. Other than that, I really don't know. I really don't know. I would much rather them trying to tie in the flashbacks with the modern day story. So that would be a cool way to do it.
Yeah. Well, it's not like Tuskens have been wiped out completely. It was just like that gang or whatever. Because, obviously Mandalorian, we still I'm not saying you're saying that, but like just keep in mind everyone out there. Like we are, there's plenty of Tusken Raiders still floating around. So we'll see what happens. Let's go to our final segment of the show. We're going to talk about what we think is coming up and give our overall rating. So, Park, start us off. What do you think is like next for the show in whether that's specific to episode 4 or specific to just, the rest of the series? But what do you think's next? And then tell us your overall rating of episode 3.
I want the next episode to be that sort of action extravaganza, the sort of all killer, no filler we've been teased with Boba Fett trying to fend against the Pykes or at least to see things escalate to that point. I imagine from there, Boba Fett will realize he needs help or something like that. There will be an episode or 2 of him establishing that, and then there's a final sort of big battle to reclaim Mos Espa. That's how I see it. But if this episode showed anything, it's that things don't always go the way you think with these shows, which is ultimately usually for the best. For the episode itself, I'd probably rate it a good 7 out of 10. Enjoyed it, very much on board still. We'll look back at this episode and realize that you needed this episode to push us forward into everything that's going to come next over the next several episodes. It had a lot of fun moments. Danny Trejo being a big dub.
Definitely.
So it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, Mike.
You know what? I'm probably gonna give this 7 out of 10 as well, or maybe 7.5. I really don't know because I've only seen it once, but I don't know. Like I genuinely just had a fun time with it, and by the end I was like, yes, can't wait for next week. And sitting here and talking about all these little details and stuff, like I'm liking the episode a lot more. But I'm just excited to see where the Hutts, what they're up to, what the mayor's up to. Obviously, we know he's in league with the Pykes, but how this biker gang plays into the larger story. And as Park said, like sometimes you know it's better when shows like just deviate from what your expectations are and stuff. And it's like, if I was, as Parks, you were saying, if I were writing the show, I would have never thought to implement the use of like this biker gang and stuff, even though they totally fit. For me, they fit the like aftermath setting of like a power vacuum. It's like, oh, the security guards moved out, we're moving in. It's like, okay, cool. And they're trying to make their presence known. So I don't know, like I just think, and the way they played into Boba's character, love that. The way the Rancor played into Boba's character, love that. It just, this episode hit all the check marks for me. Time to digest some things, and yeah, listen, I can't wait till next week. As I said, I'm big hype for this show. I'm excited for that tease that we got of like, oh, they're coming and we'll be ready for them. I'm excited for this gang war that's, you know, sort of brewing. So I'm gonna stick with a 7 out of 10 for now. But seriously excited for the show. The future of the show is super bright, and I can't wait for all the intrigue stuff to be fulfilled and all those hooks that they've been leading us on to. You know, just I hope they really they connect the dots towards the end, because nothing is more disappointing than having all this cool setup and all these cool like nods and stuff or like little teases for it to go nowhere. Fallen Star. Sorry, excuse me, I didn't mean to rag on the
boy. I swear to God.
But I genuinely am super hyped, and again, awesome to be on the podcast and talk all this stuff. And Ari, what are your thoughts on it, bro? What are your listen? You had a kind of experience with this episode, and we talked about it, you know, not just here but yesterday. And how you feeling now?
Yeah, I don't know. I think. Overall, after talking about it, watching it twice, I'm definitely feeling much more positive than negative about it. In terms of what's next, yeah, you guys were talking a lot about the present day stuff, like, yeah, the Pykes, all that, really keen for that. But also, I'm keen to see where these flashbacks are going, because Tuskens have just been wiped out. As we were talking before, I'm keen to see how Boba's going to react to these, Nikto Sandrider people. So I'm curious to see what's happening there, but yeah, just really can't wait to see how the rest of the series unfolds. But in terms of a rating, I gave episode 1 a 7 and episode 2 a 9. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, because I think it sits in between those ones. It was very solid, while being quite the mixed bag. But overall enjoyed it. And yeah, 7.5 out of 10. But that pretty much just wraps us up for today. Parks, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we're going to do a podcast again in the future. But I would love to come back again.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Please let everyone know where they can find you on socials and YouTube and all that.
Well, you can find me on YouTube as ArTorr. As I mentioned earlier, I do sort of video essay documentaries on all kinds of movies, games, and shows. I've covered several Star Wars projects, mostly in animation, with more to come in the future. You can follow me on Twitter at Parks Harmon, one word. Parks Harmon on Instagram. I don't post very much, but maybe that'll change in the future. I believe that is everywhere.
If you haven't already, please drop a like, comment, rating, or review depending on how you're listening, and subscribe or follow the channel on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever podcasts are available. Listen, y'all, on Apple Podcasts, I looked up our show, and we are we're not climbing the ranks, but we're in a much better position than we were a week ago. So please keep it up. If you are on Apple Podcasts, drop that rating, and Spotify as well. They just released like a new rating system.
They just dropped that as well. So yeah.
Please, if you're enjoying these breakdowns, show some love on these platforms and leave us a rating and how you're feeling about the show and stuff like that. And yeah, it just helps us.
And drop a review as well. You can do a review as well.
Drop a review. Yeah. Listen, if we sat here for almost 2 hours breaking down a 30-minute episode, you can listen, to a 2-hour breakdown and leave a review that will take you a minute to do. So, and we appreciate it here. So thank you. And make sure to, if you're not leaving reviews, make sure to keep up with us on our socials. Ari, where can the good people find you?
Yeah, find me on Instagram at StarWars_exchange and Twitter at the SW Exchange. Also, we forgot to say, YouTube. Hit like if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe. We appreciate it so much. Gets the algorithm going. gets us up there. So yeah, Mike, where can people find you?
Y'all can find me at all_Star Wars and on Twitter at all_Star Wars. Listen, I just read The Fallen Star. My review's coming up shortly. And yeah, hear my thoughts on all that stuff. But make sure to
and coming up this week on the podcast as well.
Oh yeah,
before episode 4 comes out, we're dropping our Fallen Star review. So be sure to tune in. Me and Mike are definitely gonna have a little bit of a heated discussion on it, I think. So, and we've got a few guests lined up as well. So be sure to check your feeds in the coming days for that.
And it won't be about Pelimoto, but can't wait to see you guys. Until then, well, we'll see y'all. May the Force be with you, and thank you for listening.
See ya.